My name is James Hargrove, and at 70 years of age, I've seen plenty in my lifetime. Fought in Vietnam, buried my wife of 42 years, raised 3 children who barely visit anymore. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened last autumn on my farm in rural Montana. I've owned this property for nearly 30 years. 5 acres of mostly flat land, with a modest 2-story farmhouse that creaks with every gust of wind. My closest neighbor is 3 miles down the dirt road, which is exactly how I like it. After Sarah passed, the solitude became both my comfort and my prison. It started with the livestock. First, it was just a chicken with its neck torn open. I blamed a fox, or maybe a coyote. Wildlife gets bold when winter approaches and food becomes scarce. But then I found my prize heifer, the one I'd been raising since she was a calf, torn to pieces in the north pasture. Something had ripped through her hide like it was tissue paper. The ground around her was soaked dark with blood, and parts of her, parts I couldn't bring myself to identify, were missing. The county sheriff, Dale Pritchard, came out to take a look. He scratched his head beneath his hat and muttered something about mountain lions venturing down from the higher elevations. But I've lived in these parts long enough to recognize mountain lion kills. This was different. The violence was excessive, almost deliberate. That night I locked every door and window in the house, loaded my Winchester and kept it beside my bed. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by every small noise. The house settling, branches scraping against the siding, the distant yip of coyotes. Around 3 in the morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of my remaining cattle, panicked and bellowing in the barn. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight, pulled on my boots, and rushed outside in my pajamas and coat. The air was bitter cold, my breath billowing in front of me like smoke. The moon hung low and full in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. As I approached the barn, the cattle fell suddenly, unnaturally silent. When I pushed open the barn door, the smell hit me first. Metallic, wet, the smell of fresh slaughter. My flashlight beam trembled across the dirt floor, illuminating splashes of crimson that looked black in the dim light. My 2 remaining cows lay in heaps of torn flesh and exposed bone. And then I heard it, a low guttural sound, not quite a growl, not quite human, coming from the shadows at the back of the barn. My light caught a pair of eyes reflecting back at me. Not the familiar green-gold reflection of a predator's eyes, but something else. Something that looked almost human, except for the feral, unnatural amber glow. They were set in a face that made my heart stutter in my chest. It was roughly the shape of a man, but wrong in every possible way. Covered in coarse, dark fur, a protruding snout where a human nose and mouth should be, and the teeth. Dear God, the teeth that gleamed wet and sharp in the beam of my flashlight. I raised my rifle, but before I could take aim, the thing launched itself toward me with impossible speed. I fired once, the shot going wild as I stumbled backward. The creature's claws raked across my chest, tearing through my coat and shirt, drawing lines of fire across my skin. I fell backward out of the barn door, scrambling away on my hands and feet like a crab. The thing emerged into the moonlight, and I got my first full look at it, standing upright on 2 legs like a man, but easily 7 feet tall, with a hunched, powerful build. Its hands, if you could call them that, ended in long, curved claws caked with blood and gore. Its face was the worst part, a hideous blend of wolf and human features, frozen in a perpetual snarl. This wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a man. The word came unbidden to my mind, a term from childhood ghost stories and late-night monster movies. Werewolf. I fired again, this time hitting the creature in the shoulder. It howled, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath me, but didn't fall. Instead, it fixed those terrible eyes on me with what I can only describe as hatred. I ran. For a 70-year-old man with arthritis in both knees, I ran like I was 20 again. Across the yard, up the porch steps, through the door which I slammed and locked behind me. I collapsed against it, gasping for breath, feeling warm blood soaking through my shirt from the claw marks on my chest. Through the window, I could see the creature prowling at the edge of my yard, moving with a terrible grace despite its bulk. It tilted its head back and let out another of those bone-chilling howls that seemed to echo across the valley. I called Sheriff Pritchard, my voice shaking so badly I could barely form words. He thought I was having some kind of breakdown, said he'd come out in the morning to check on me. I tried to tell him that morning would be too late, but he just told me to lock my doors and try to get some sleep. Sleep, as if that were possible. I spent the rest of the night moving from window to window, tracking the creature as it circled my house. Sometimes it would disappear from view, and those moments were the worst, not knowing where it was, if it had found a way in. Dawn came after what felt like an eternity. When the first pale light crept across the horizon, I saw the creature retreat into the tree line at the edge of my property. I watched until it disappeared completely, then collapsed into my armchair, exhausted but afraid to close my eyes. Sheriff Pritchard arrived around 9. He found me still in my bloodied clothes, rifle across my lap. His expression changed from concern to alarm when he saw the state of me, but that was nothing compared to his reaction when we walked out to the barn together and he saw what remained of my cattle. "Jesus Christ, James," he muttered, stepping carefully around the carnage. "What the hell did this?" I told him exactly what I'd seen. The creature that walked like a man but wasn't one. The amber eyes, the claws and teeth that had torn through flesh and bone like they were nothing. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're saying, what? A werewolf did this?" His voice held a note of forced patience, the kind you use with children or senile old folks. "James, you've had a shock. There's a perfectly rational explanation for this. Probably a bear, maybe rabid. We'll get animal control out here." "It wasn't a goddamn bear, Dale," I snapped. "I know what I saw." But he wouldn't believe me. No one would. The official report listed the incident as an animal attack, suspected grizzly. They sent a wildlife officer to set traps around my property, but I knew they wouldn't catch anything. Not with regular traps, anyway. I spent the next day researching, pulling out old books from the local library, scouring the internet for anything I could find about werewolves that didn't sound like complete nonsense. Most of it was fantasy, of course. Silver bullets, full moons, men who transformed into beasts and back again. But buried in the folklore were accounts that sounded eerily similar to what I'd experienced. Creatures that were neither fully wolf nor fully human, but something in between. Predators that hunted with deliberate cruelty that seemed to take pleasure in the terror of their victims. That night, I melted down some of Sarah's old silver jewelry, a necklace she never wore, a serving spoon from her grandmother, and cast crude bullets. I didn't really believe they would work, but I was desperate enough to try anything. The creature returned after midnight. I heard it scratching at the walls of the house, testing windows and doors for weakness. It was toying with me, I realized. It could have broken through if it wanted to, but it was prolonging the hunt, savoring my fear. I caught glimpses of it through the windows, a dark shape moving with unnatural speed around the perimeter of my home. Each time I raised my rifle but couldn't get a clear shot. Then the power went out. One moment the house was lit, and the next I was plunged into total darkness. I heard a crash from the back of the house, the sound of breaking glass and splintering wood. It had gotten in through the bathroom window. I moved as quietly as I could through the darkened house, making my way toward the utility room where I kept a flashlight. Behind me, I could hear movement, the click of claws on hardwood floors, the sound of something large breathing heavily, tracking me by scent. I fumbled in the dark for the flashlight, found it, switched it on. The beam cut through the darkness, and for a split second, illuminated the creature at the end of the hallway. It lunged forward with that same impossible speed. I fired twice, the silver bullets finding their mark in its chest. The creature stumbled, let out a roar that was part animal fury, part human pain. But it didn't fall. Instead, it charged forward again, closing the distance between us in heartbeats. I barely managed to dodge sideways into the kitchen as it barreled past, its claws catching my arm and leaving deep gashes. I slammed the kitchen door shut behind me and wedged a chair under the handle. Knowing it wouldn't hold for long, blood ran down my arm, hot and slick. The kitchen had a door that led outside, my only chance of escape. But as I reached for it, I heard the creature hurling itself against the door I'd just barricaded. Wood splintered. The chair legs scraped against the floor. I yanked open the exterior door and rushed out into the night, the cold air hitting me like a physical blow. Behind me, I heard the kitchen door finally give way with a crack of breaking wood. I ran toward the old storm cellar, a relic from the previous owners, built during the Cold War as a bomb shelter. Its heavy steel door was my only hope of safety. I reached it just as I heard the creature burst out of the house behind me, its howl splitting the night. I wrenched open the cellar door and practically fell down the concrete steps, pulling the door shut above me with all my strength. It closed with a metallic clang that echoed in the small space. I fumbled with the interior lock, a heavy steel bar that slid into place across the door. Almost immediately, something heavy slammed into the door from outside. The impact reverberated through the cellar. Another slam, and another. The door held, but I didn't know for how long. The cellar was small and sparse. Concrete walls, a few shelves with ancient canned goods, a rusted cot in the corner. I sank down onto it, clutching my rifle, and waited. The creature circled above, occasionally hurling itself against the door. Hours passed this way. My arm throbbed where its claws had torn into me. I worried about infection. If an ordinary animal bite could cause rabies, what would the bite or scratch of this thing do? Eventually, the attacks on the door stopped. I strained to listen, but heard nothing outside. Had it given up? Or was it merely waiting, knowing I'd have to come out eventually? I must have dozed off despite my terror, because when I next opened my eyes, pale daylight was filtering through the small ventilation grate near the ceiling. The creature, if it followed the pattern of the previous night, would have retreated at dawn. I waited another hour to be sure, then cautiously unbarred the cellar door and pushed it open, my rifle ready. The yard was empty. In the daylight, the damage to my house was clearly visible. Broken windows, the back door hanging from a single hinge. I made my way inside, stepping carefully through the wreckage. Blood smeared the hallway floor, some mine, some from the creature where my silver bullets had struck it. I followed the trail through the kitchen and out the back door, across the yard and into the woods beyond my property. The blood trail continued for nearly a mile before I lost it at the edge of a small stream. Whatever I had wounded hadn't died, at least not nearby. I returned home and spent the day fortifying as best I could, boarding up windows, reinforcing doors. I called a locksmith who came out from town and installed heavy deadbolts on every exterior door. I told him I'd had a break-in, which wasn't entirely a lie. That night, the creature didn't return, nor the next. I began to hope that perhaps I'd wounded it badly enough to drive it away permanently. A week passed. My claw wounds began to heal, though they left angry red scars across my chest and arm. Sheriff Pritchard stopped by to check on me, took one look at the state of my house, and asked what the hell had happened. I told him vandals, and he clearly didn't believe me, but also clearly didn't want to hear the truth again. Just as I was starting to believe the nightmare might be over, Mrs. Abernathy from the Jenkins farm 3 miles down the road called in hysterics. Her husband hadn't come home from checking their north fields. Sheriff Pritchard organized a search party. They found what was left of Thomas Jenkins scattered across an acre of his own land. The official report again cited a grisly attack. The wildlife officer set more traps. The local paper ran a piece warning residents to be vigilant about bear safety. I knew better. The creature had simply found easier prey. That night, I loaded my rifle with the remaining silver bullets and drove to the Jenkins farm. Mrs. Abernathy was staying with her sister in town, the house dark and empty. I parked my truck behind the barn, where it wouldn't be visible from the road, and settled in to wait. Around 2 in the morning, I saw it. The creature emerged from the tree line exactly as it had on my property, moving with that same terrible blend of animal grace and human intelligence. In the moonlight, I could see that its fur was patched in places, healing wounds where my silver bullets had struck. It prowled around the empty farmhouse, occasionally rising onto its hind legs to peer through windows. Finding the house abandoned, it turned its attention to the barn, where the Jenkins livestock was penned. I raised my rifle, steadied my breathing, and took careful aim. The shot rang out in the quiet night. The creature jerked as the bullet struck it in the back. It whirled around, those amber eyes scanning the darkness, finding me where I stood beside my truck. its lips pulled back in what I can only describe as a grin, a grotesque parody of human expression on that monstrous face. And then it charged. I fired again, hitting it in the chest. It staggered but kept coming. Another shot, my last silver bullet, caught it in the throat. Dark blood sprayed from the wound. The creature stumbled, fell to its knees, one clawed hand clutching at its neck. For a moment I thought it was over. Then with a sound that was almost a laugh, it rose again. Wounded, bleeding, but still terribly alive, still coming for me. I had no more silver bullets. My ordinary rounds would slow it down at best. I scrambled into my truck, fumbling with the keys, my hands slick with sweat. The engine roared to life just as the creature reached the tailgate. I slammed the truck into reverse, then forward, trying to run it down. The creature dodged with that unnatural speed, then leaped onto the hood of the truck. Its claws punctured the metal like it was paper. That terrible face pressed against the windshield, jaws snapping, glass cracking under the pressure. I jerked the wheel hard, sending the truck into a spin. The creature lost its grip and was thrown clear. I didn't wait to see if it would get up again. I floored the accelerator and sped away, gravel spraying from beneath my tires. In my rearview mirror, I saw the creature rise once more, blood darkening its fur. It didn't pursue me. Perhaps it couldn't, given its wounds. Or perhaps it simply knew where to find me when it was ready. I drove straight to Sheriff Pritchard's house, pounded on his door until he answered, bleary-eyed and annoyed in his bathrobe. I told him everything, about the Jenkins farm, about shooting the creature, about how nothing seemed to kill it permanently. He thought I was having some kind of breakdown, suggested I check myself into the hospital in Missoula, get some rest, talk to someone about what I'd been through. He didn't believe a word. No one would believe me. I was on my own. I spent the next days researching more intensely. If silver wouldn't kill it, what would? The folklore was inconsistent. Some sources suggested decapitation, others burning. Some claimed that a werewolf could only be killed by someone it loved, which wasn't helpful at all. I prepared as best I could, sharpened my axe, filled containers with gasoline, fortified my storm cellar with additional locks, food, water. I knew the creature would come for me eventually. The wounds I'd inflicted had only made it more determined. 3 nights later, it returned. I was waiting in the cellar, watching through the ventilation grate. It circled the house first, then, finding it empty, began methodically checking the outbuildings. When it approached the cellar, I ducked down, holding my breath. The creature paused directly above me. I could hear it sniffing, tracking my scent. It knew I was there. The cellar door shuddered as it struck it once, testing its strength, then again harder. I had set my trap carefully. Gasoline-soaked rags surrounded the cellar entrance. Now I struck a match and pushed it through the small ventilation grate. The whoosh of igniting gasoline was followed immediately by an inhuman shriek. Through the grate, I could see flames engulfing the creature. It thrashed and howled, rolling on the ground in a desperate attempt to extinguish the fire. But the gasoline clung to its fur, and the flames only grew. The smell was horrific, burning hair and flesh with an underlying odor I couldn't identify. Not quite animal, not quite human. Something else entirely. The creature's howls gradually weakened. Eventually, they stopped altogether. I waited until the flames died down before cautiously opening the cellar door. What remained barely resembled anything living, a charred, misshapen mass that still steamed in the cool night air. I approached it carefully, axe in hand, ready to strike if it somehow still lived. It didn't move. I prodded it with the axe handle. Nothing. Relief washed over me, so powerful that my knees nearly buckled. I spent the rest of the night digging a deep pit far from my house, at the edge of my property where the ground was soft. I dragged the creature's remains there, covered them with more gasoline, and set them ablaze again. I wasn't taking any chances. When the fire finally died down to embers, I filled in the pit, piling heavy rocks over the site. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every sound, expected to see those amber eyes watching me from the shadows. But nothing came. The attacks on livestock in the area stopped. Whatever the creature had been, it seemed it was truly gone. I told no one what had happened. Who would believe me? An old man claiming to have fought and killed a werewolf? I'd be laughed out of the county, maybe even committed. Instead, I kept my silence, repaired my house, bought new cattle to replace those I'd lost, tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, but I keep my rifle loaded and I no longer go out after dark. And sometimes on nights when the moon is full and bright, I think I hear howling in the distance. Not the familiar yipping of coyotes or the rare call of wolves, but something different. Something that makes the scars on my chest and arm throb with remembered pain. And I wonder if the creature I killed was the only one of its kind, or if there are others out there, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. So if you're ever driving through the backcountry of Montana and you see an old farmhouse with boards on some of the windows and too many locks on the doors, that might be me. And if you're thinking of stopping to ask for directions or a drink of water, I'd advise against it, especially after dark, because some things, once seen, can never be unseen. Some experiences change you forever, and some monsters I've learned are all too real.